This video concerns logging bills in the daily closeout. You're going to find in your Dropbox folder a series of scans as PDFs with each being the next number. Scanning any bill or receipt that we get into the restaurant during the day, we're going to assign it a number. The number itself doesn't mean anything. It is just the next number in the sequence. So the next bill or receipt that we scan in is going to be 4434. And we can open this up and take a look at what we have. So this is a U.S. food bill. We can just rotate it a little bit so we can look at U.S. food invoice for the day. Notice that there's only about 6 or 7 of these right here. We save every one of these, and we theoretically have every scan that we have ever made during the restaurant's life, and we kind of file these away into another folder called these invoice PDFs. And we group them in series of 100 just to be able to find one. So if we needed to find scan 4104, we could just come up here and 4104, and it is. Let's see what 4104 is. It's a produce. For being able to know what the number is that you'll find, but we'll talk about that later. When we file these, instead of just having a bunch of scans here, you can grab a few of these at a time and you simply slide it up into there until invoice is highlighted, and let go of your cursor, and that's taken those 3 scans and it slid it in here. And then we're going to do it again and actually put it in the correct. These are obviously 4400s into that group. And then when we get to 4500, we'll create a new folder that says 4599. We'll just keep going on that forever. Notice that you don't have anything available before 3800 here. Periodically, Gordon will grab those and he keeps them in his computer at the home office. And if you ever needed a scan that's that old from way back, just ask him and we should be able to retrieve it. So that's how we sort of keep our scans and log them and file them away, and how we can find them again if we need them. But back to entering in bills. Let's see. Again, we talked about in the lists, making sure that the names and the vendors are consistent, and here's where this comes into play. Notice here's your common vendor list. Just clicking on that one time brings up a drop-down box here, and it shows you this list. So here is Home Depot, and that is reading from right there. You can just, you don't like that, you just hit delete, it doesn't there. So if we are using a common vendor, it's a much shorter list, a much easier list to deal with. Save a lot, we go there all the time. Instead of picking out of a much longer list and having to scroll down to find, whatever, Sherwin-Williams. So we're going to delete that or delete that. Notice it shows you or here. You obviously can't have 2 vendors at once, so pick from here or here, doesn't matter which. Transaction type, we're going to start there. Anything, if you've written a check, it's going to come out of the checking account. If you took cash and went to the store, it's going to be a paid out. Store trade is not too often, but if restaurants are flopping product back and forth, obviously you want to get the proper accounting for it. If you went and got chicken from another restaurant, you need to pay for that chicken, and on the other side, they are obviously want a credit for that. So there's no cash that exchanges. You don't have to pay cash for it. You don't pay a check for it. We just do a store trade, and you're properly charged for the food that you took from another restaurant or properly credited for food that you provided to another restaurant. But other than that, we're going to treat it just like a bill or a credit. So we'll delete that. The credit cards here for Home Depot and Lowe's are almost never used, and Gordon has those cards, so it's very rare that you would ever use those. The vast majority of what you're going to do is either checking account or paid out. So let's say checking account. Now notice when I pick checking account, notice this section in the upper right here. What am I missing? You're not going to be able to post this invoice until you have everything in here correct. And notice down here, it tells you that this is incomplete because obviously all we have is right now is a transaction type. We don't have any other information. So if I tried to post this, nothing happens. I try to hit this post invoice here and nothing happens. There's a log on the bottom. Notice that it shows you a note here. This invoice list is only a log for your information. You cannot fix mistakes here. If you post an invoice in error, include that in info and an email to Heather to fix. I'll get to more of that in a later. But you can see what we've done so far in bills for the day. So we wrote a check. The transaction number, notice that a little button pops up here. If you wrote a check, this is the check number that you wrote. If you did a paid out, a store trade, or we used our debit card, which of course doesn't have a check number, but it is out of the checking account, just like everybody else's debit card, we're going to call that transaction number 1, and then the second one during the day would be number 2, and the second one number during the day would be number 3. It starts again every day. The numbers itself don't mean anything, but when it imports into QuickBooks, it has to have a unique number here. So notice on the log that we have done 4 paid outs today, and we correctly, the first one was number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Those numbers don't really mean anything. They reset the next day. The next day, then the first paid out we do will be number 1, number 2, number 3, and so forth. If we did a store trade, if the next one was a store trade, we would call that number 5 because that is the unique one down here. So you can see what number you're on. The next paid out for the day should be number 5. But if you write a checking, notice here, transaction checking, transaction number 3836, so that's the check number. So we're going to assume that the next check number for the day is 3836. So we'll put that in there, 3836. Scan number. It also conveniently tells you what the last scan used was here. Save a lot, 4400. It also tells you here. So we're going to assume the next scan number that you scanned is going to be 4401. What some managers do, I found, and this might be helpful, is once you actually scan it, is kind of write the scan number that you assign it on the scan, and then when you're entering it, you'll know which one is which. Sometimes we do have a problem where we get confused of we save a scan to a certain number, but then when we're putting it in here, we forget which scan is which number, and we get them wrong, and then that's confusing when you have to go look them up. So please try to pay attention to what scan number you assign to the scan, and then put that correct number in here. Notice that more of these are turning green as I'm going along and finding out what I'm missing. So transaction type, yes, we have that, it's green. Transaction number, yes, we have that, so it's green. Scan number, yes, we have that, so it's green. What are some of the other things that we're missing? One vendor only, what does that mean? Well, I don't have any vendors. So we're going to pick one. Gourmet beverage. So now it turns green. We have one vendor only. What if I messed up and said, oh, this is also Airmasters? Well, now, hold on, you've messed up. You can't write a check to both Airmasters and Great Gourmet Beverage, excuse me. So this goes back to red. You've made a mistake. Oh yeah, that's wrong. Now we're okay. We have one vendor. Total dollar amount. This is the total dollar amount for the entire invoice, $500. We have to assign this invoice different accounting categories. We're not done yet. Still incomplete. We need an accounting category, and we need the dollar entries to or the split to match. You are allowed to take a given vendor and have as many as 5 different accounting categories and split up those expenses. Often some of the bigger bills like Cheney Brothers and US Food, you might have 2, 3, or 4 different. You might have food, you might have paper goods, you might have chemicals, you might have a delivery charge, you might have sales tax. So I don't know if we've ever run across needing more than 5, but 5 generally covers it. If there's only one one accounting category, then that's all we need. Same principle. There are accounting categories that we use all the time, and these are the vast majority of what we do. So it's a short list. 5,200 food purchases. Again, you do not get to just type in anything you want, 5,200, and leave it at that, because it'll take it here, but when we try to import that into QuickBooks, it's going to kick it out as an error, and it gets messed up, and we have to fix it. So that's why we use the drop down exactly, because that's the way it exactly is in our QuickBooks, and that's the way we keep it. We have an accounting category. What if I made also the silly error here? You can't have 2. That's bad. Everything's green. This total the total here matches the total there. So that shows you that the difference between the total here and the total here is 0. So it tells you you've matched. This turns green, and it is ready to post. If I hit ready to post here, you'll notice on the bottom, there it is. And we're back to 0. $3,837. Scan 4402. Not one of our common vendors. We don't. This one was a little bit different. Acme Electric. Well, actually, that's a bad example. Well, uniforms. But the uniform was only $72. You're still 28 short, and it'll tell you your expenses are short of the total. So therefore, I try to post it, nothing's right, red here. The dollar entry or the split doesn't match. So we need another accounting category, and you can split it. Well, the other one that I want to use is not on my common list. So over here, I'm going to come to whatever, places of mailing. Well, that's $18. I'm still short $10. I still can't do anything. Oh, well, we'll come back over here. Oh yeah, state taxes. This is typically for sales tax. So we know they're short $10. We can look at the invoice itself. It is exactly $10. Now it matches, and everything is green, and we are ready to go. Amazon listed one time, 3 different categories: checking, check number, scan number, total, and the splits. If we do a paid out, got to go to the store, took some cash out of the drawer. Well, we know that we need to go to number 5 because this is the 5th one we haven't used that isn't a check. 4403 now. We just went to Walmart for $5.50 for food. That's all it was. Anytime we use a paid out, we like to please make note of what we bought. Notice here previously to go silverware, mayonnaise. Milk. We do track when we go to the store to buy food. Ideally, we try to keep these purchases as low as possible. That gives us an indication of, gee, why did we have to go to milk? Why didn't we get it somewhere else? Why were we short on our delivery? But that's a whole nother discussion. Let's say we gave food to another restaurant. They called us up. Do you have any chicken? Yes, we'll let you have some chicken. Store trade. Obviously, there's no check number, so this is number 6. There is a form to use for that we would scan just like an invoice. More on how to do that later. You have the other 2 restaurants. So this is the Tampa restaurant we're working in. So MLK or Seminole is one of your common vendors. You figure out that the chicken that you're letting you have them is worth $25. Common category. We want a credit for giving them chicken. So we want to get paid, so to speak, for the chicken that we've given them. So that chicken is food. It's not an expense. We want a credit. If you expense yourself $25, first of all, it's going to get angry at you for saying you can't have a credit and an expense on the same line. If you expense $25, it'll let you post it, but it's going to charge you the $25 for food that you gave away. You don't want to do that. Obviously, you want a credit. Let's delete that first so it doesn't get mad at me. We're just going to tell ourselves we gave them chicken and it's ready to post. Seminole, notice that it is in the credit line here. And you'll probably properly get credited for the food that you've just let Seminole have. 2 other things. As we said, some of the bigger vendors, you have a number of different categories, and some vendors that we use all the time, we use the same category all the time. So we have like little quick fill buttons over here. Mike's Pies, we get all the time, and we only ever get food from them. We don't buy chemicals from Mike's Pies. So if you put in Mike's Pies here, it helps you out. We always write them a check. There's the vendor, and it's always food. You still, of course, have to fill in the check number, the scan number, the dollar amount here, and then you'll be good to go. If you want to clear all of your bill entries right here, just takes it out. Cheney typically has 4 different categories that we would buy on most of their invoices. So you're going to have to split those up 4 different ways. Produce menu is our produce vendor here. There's that. If you get a new vendor, you can go to your list page down here and do the new vendor. Or here, this takes you here. It's the same difference. And then you'll be able to pick from them for your list. The only other thing is sometimes we give employees loans. This is a little bit of a slightly different process, but not really. We treat that just as a paid out because typically they will have cash. We do not, the employees are not under the vendor. We treat the employee like a vendor. Notice that already during the day, Yvette took a loan. So we treat her as a vendor. That is going to be the accounting category. Typically, we give them a paid out in cash, so that's why it's number 1. She has to sign an IOU to verify that she actually took that money. The dollar amount here is weird, but that's a different story. For the most part, it'll be a pretty round number. We do have policies in place about giving out loans and when we do it and how we do it, and that's a different discussion. But for this discussion, in terms of just logging, giving an employee a loan, the first thing we do is we hit this print IOU button, and that will print the IOU for them. That is also here under loan agreement. It's really simple. They're just going to print their name and how much was taken, and they're agreeing to us deduct it from their paycheck. This will act as your invoice, and you will scan this once it is filled out and signed and assign it a scan number. This is not a personal document. We don't have to put this in Heather's docs. Holding it just as a scan number, just like it was any other receipt, is good enough. So we're going to call from an employee. Here's Ricky. Again, that reads from the employee list. That's why we want to keep this list only current employees. If we had a bunch of old employees when we were doing this, you would be looking through a lot longer list here to try and find the right person. So there's your person. Once you have that person filled out, you do this loan quick fill, and that will take the person that you've designated for there, call them a vendor now, put in the right accounting category. I left this blank even though it is almost always a paid out. Once in a while, if you were to write them a check for the loan, this would allow you to do this. For the most part, it's a paid out. You still have to do everything else here that you normally would. Transaction would be number 7. Whatever you scanned his IOU for, let's assume it's the next one, and $50. You're short $50. We're still not there yet. We gave him $50 and we're ready to post. When you do these paid outs, it will properly account for in the daily closeout your paid out total here. So without getting too much into the cashier screen and the daily total screen, which we will do later, your drawer will be messed up if you're counting the cash during the middle of the day, or your cash will be messed up at the end of the night if you have not entered in your paid outs. So these paid outs, dollar amounts, are going to be accounted for in properly calculating your cash over short once you have them in here. It's automatic. You don't have to do anything. Once you enter it here as a paid out, you will no longer be responsible for that $130 in balancing your drawer either during the day or at the end of the night. I think that is it for the bills section.